Kepler 442b's distress signal was a call for help that echoed across the stars. But while the Galactic Union bickered over protocols, the Void Reapers launched their brutal assault. Only humanity moved swiftly, sending their fleet into the heart of danger, determined to show that the cost of ignoring a Deathworlders warning is far greater than any diplomatic failure. The emergency beacon cut through space like a knife through silence, carrying with it the desperate plea of people who had nowhere else to turn. Research Station Alpha 7, orbiting the distant world of Kepler 442b, had sent its distress signal across hundreds of light years, hoping someone, anyone, would hear their call for help. Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her back against the cold metal wall of the storage compartment, listening to the sounds of destruction echoing through the station's corridors. Her hands shook as she clutched the portable data drive containing 3 years of research on the ancient alien artifacts they had discovered on the planet below. The soft blue glow from her emergency light cast eerie shadows across the faces of the 12 other researchers hiding with her. "How long until they find us?" whispered Dr. James Park, the station's linguist, his voice barely audible above the distant sounds of weapons fire and metal being torn apart. Elena checked her chronometer. "The distress signal went out 20 minutes ago. If anyone received it, help could arrive in hours or days, depending on who responds first." Through the ventilation grate above their heads, they could hear the heavy footsteps of their attackers moving through the upper levels. The Void Reapers had come without warning, their black ships emerging from the darkness between stars like nightmares made real. These nomadic raiders had terrorized the frontier territories for decades, appearing suddenly to strip valuable resources from undefended colonies and research stations before vanishing back into the void. 300 light-years away, in the sterile white corridors of Galactic Union Monitoring Station Omega-12, Communications Officer Zara Voss stared at the emergency signal flashing on her screen. Her crystalline skin shifted from pale blue to deep purple as stress hormones flooded her system. As a member of the Altarian species, her body automatically displayed her emotional state through color changes, and right now, those colors showed pure alarm. "Commander Threx, we have an emergency beacon from the frontier territories," she called out, her voice carrying the melodic tones typical of her people. Commander Threx, a large insectoid being from the planet Kythera, clicked his mandibles in acknowledgement as he approached her station. His compound eyes reflected the red warning lights flashing across the monitoring center. "What is the nature of the emergency, Officer Voss?" "Research Station Alpha 7 reports they are under attack. They're requesting immediate military assistance." Zara's skin had now shifted to a worried shade of orange. "Sir, the station houses 43 civilians, mostly scientists studying pre-spaceflight civilizations." Commander Threx's antennae twitched as he considered the situation. Like most species in the Galactic Union, the Kytherans were careful, methodical beings who preferred to think through every angle before taking action. "Begin filing the emergency response protocol, Officer Voss. Contact the Emergency Response Committee and schedule an urgent meeting for tomorrow morning. We must follow proper procedures." "But sir, people are dying right now," Zara protested, her skin flashing bright red with frustration. "Officer Voss, we cannot simply rush into unknown situations without proper authorization and planning. The committee will assess the threat level and determine the appropriate response. That is how civilized societies handle emergencies." Far from the comfortable bureaucracy of the Galactic Union Station on the rough frontier world of New Caledonia, the same distress signal reached the communications array of Fort Henderson. The human military outpost was a collection of prefabricated buildings and defensive structures built on a rocky plateau overlooking vast mining operations. The air was thin and cold, and the red sun cast everything in shades of amber and rust. Sergeant Lisa Rodriguez burst through the doors of the command center, her boots echoing against the metal floor. "Captain Chen, we've got an emergency transmission from the Kepler system. Research station under attack, requesting immediate assistance." Captain Marcus Chen looked up from the tactical reports he had been reviewing. At 35, he had the weathered appearance of someone who had spent his career on the frontier, protecting human colonies from the dangers that lurked in the darkness between stars. His dark eyes showed the kind of determination that came from making life-or-death decisions where hesitation meant people died. "How many civilians?" he asked, already moving toward the communications console. 43 confirmed, sir. Mixed species research team studying alien artifacts." Rodriguez handed him the full transmission data. "The attackers are identified as Void Reapers, at least 6 ships." Chen's jaw tightened. He had encountered the Void Reapers before, during the massacre at Colony 7 where they had killed 300 settlers while the Galactic Union debated response protocols. "Prep the fleet for immediate departure. All ships combat-ready status in 15 minutes. Sir, shouldn't we contact the Galactic Union for authorization? Asked Lieutenant Hayes, the station's diplomatic liaison. Chen turned to face the younger officer with an expression that could have melted steel. Lieutenant, there are 43 people about to die while bureaucrats fill out forms. My authorization comes from basic human decency and the oath I took to protect innocent life. He activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the captain. We have civilians under attack in the Kepler system. We deploy in 10 minutes. This is not a drill. The human response was immediate and overwhelming. Within minutes, the shipyard came alive with activity as crews rushed to prepare their vessels for combat. The UES Defiant, Chen's flagship, was a heavy cruiser designed for frontier patrol duty. Unlike the elegant, sleek ships favored by other species, human vessels were built for durability and function. They looked like what they were, weapons of war designed by a species that had learned to fight for survival on a world that tried to kill them every day. Joining the Defiant were the destroyers, UES Wolverine and UES Stalker, the frigate UES Ranger, and 2 assault transports carrying marine units. The human fleet was small compared to the massive battle groups that core world species preferred, but every ship was crewed by people who understood that sometimes violence was the only answer to violence. Back on Research Station Alpha 7, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The Void Reapers had breached the outer hull in 3 locations and were systematically working their way through each section of the station. Dr. Vasquez could hear the distinctive whine of energy weapons getting closer to their hiding place. Elena, we can't just sit here and wait to die, whispered Dr. Sarah Kim, the station's archaeologist. Her usually calm demeanor had cracked under the stress of the last hour. The security protocols are holding them back, Elena replied, though she knew it was only a matter of time. The station's automated defenses had been designed to handle equipment failures and asteroid impacts, not a coordinated military assault. Through the ventilation system, they could hear voices speaking in the harsh, guttural language of the Void Reapers. These beings had once been part of the galactic community, but centuries of raiding and isolation had transformed them into something that barely resembled their civilized ancestors. They were tall, gaunt humanoids with pale skin marked by ritual scarifications and cybernetic implants that glowed with malevolent red light. The sound of cutting tools echoed through the walls as the raiders worked to breach the blast doors protecting the research section. Elena knew they had perhaps 30 minutes before their hiding place was discovered. She activated her personal communicator and began recording what might be her final message. This is Dr. Elena Vasquez, Chief Research Officer of Station Alpha 7. If anyone receives this message, please know that we discovered something incredible here. The artifacts on Kepler 442b are not just ancient technology, they're a warning. A message left by a civilization that faced the same choice we face now: unite and survive, or remain divided and fall. The cutting sound stopped suddenly, replaced by an ominous silence that was somehow more terrifying than the noise had been. Elena held her breath, knowing that their hunters were listening for any sign of life in the supposedly empty sections of the station. A new sound reached them through the ventilation system, the heavy footsteps of armored boots moving with military precision. But these footsteps were different from the chaotic movement of the raiders. These moved with purpose and coordination that spoke of professional training and discipline. Elena, do you hear that? Dr. Park whispered, his eyes wide with hope. Through the communication system, a new voice crackled to life. The voice was human, speaking with the calm authority of someone accustomed to combat situations. Research Station Alpha 7, this is Captain Marcus Chen of the UES Defiant. We have received your distress call and are moving to assist. All civilians remain in secure locations. We are coming to get you. Elena felt tears streaming down her face as relief flooded through her body. Someone had heard their call for help. Someone was coming to save them. But even as hope bloomed in her chest, she knew that the real battle was just beginning. The Void Reapers would not give up their prize easily, and the human fleet was outnumbered and far from home. In the cold vacuum of space above Kepler 442b, 2 forces prepared for a confrontation that would determine whether civilization meant anything beyond the core worlds of the galaxy. The humans had made their choice, and now they would have to live with the consequences of answering a cry for help that everyone else had chosen to ignore. When diplomacy fails, the UES Defiant dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system like a predator emerging from the shadows. Captain Marcus Chen stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back as he studied the tactical display showing the devastation ahead. Research Station Alpha 7 hung in orbit around the planet, its hull breached in multiple locations, atmosphere venting into space like blood from a wounded animal. Tactical report, Chen ordered, his voice cutting through the tense silence on the bridge. 6 Void Reaper vessels in attack formation around the station, reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Walsh, the ship's tactical officer. 3 heavy cruisers, 2 destroyers, and 1 command ship. They've disabled the station's defensive systems and appear to be conducting boarding operations. Chen's jaw tightened as he watched the enemy ships moving around their target like sharks circling wounded prey. The Void Reapers commanded superior numbers and firepower, but they had made one critical mistake. They had threatened innocent people within range of humans who gave a damn. Communications, open a channel to the Void Reaper command ship, Chen ordered. Sir, are you sure that's wise? Asked Lieutenant Hayes, the diplomatic liaison. Standard protocol suggests we should contact the Galactic Union for coordination before engaging in first contact with hostile forces. Chen turned to look at the younger officer with an expression that could have frozen plasma. Lieutenant, there are 43 civilians on that station who don't have time for standard protocols. Open the channel. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of the Void Reaper command ship. The figure who appeared was tall and gaunt, his pale skin covered in ritual scars that glowed with bioluminescent implants. His eyes were completely black, replaced by cybernetic sensors that tracked movement with predatory precision. This was Thane Carex, the Void Reaper commander whose name was whispered in fear across a dozen star systems. Human vessel, Carex spoke, his voice artificially enhanced by vocal implants that gave it an otherworldly quality. You have entered a Void Reaper operational zone. Withdraw immediately or share the fate of these pathetic researchers. Chen stepped forward, positioning himself directly in front of the camera. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had never backed down from a fight in his life. Commander Carex, I am Captain Marcus Chen of the Terran Defense Force. You are holding innocent civilians hostage and conducting piracy operations in violation of galactic law. I am ordering you to release the hostages immediately and withdraw from this system. Carex tilted his head, studying the human captain with the same interest a scientist might show when examining an unusual specimen. Captain Chen, you command 5 ships against my 6. Your vessels are smaller and carry fewer weapons. Your species is barely spacefaring by galactic standards. What makes you think you can dictate terms to me? Because those people asked for help, and we answered, Chen replied simply. That's all the authority I need. The Void Reaper commander's scarred features twisted into what might have been a smile. How refreshingly primitive. You would risk your ships and crew for strangers you have never met? Every time. Carex was silent for a long moment, processing this response. In his long career of raiding and pillaging, he had encountered dozens of species. Most submitted immediately when faced with superior firepower. Others attempted to negotiate for minimal losses. None had ever simply stated their intention to fight for strangers as if it were the most natural thing in the universe. Very well, Captain. I will give you a demonstration of what resistance costs. Carex gestured to someone off-screen, and the view shifted to show the station's central hub where a group of researchers was being held at gunpoint. Dr. Elena Vasquez was among them, her hands bound behind her back as she knelt on the metal deck. Her eyes showed defiance despite her circumstances, the kind of courage that came from dedicating her life to expanding the boundaries of knowledge. Choose, Captain, Carex continued. Withdraw now, or watch these civilians die one by one until you see reason. Chen's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Every instinct screamed at him to attack immediately, but he knew that rushing in would only guarantee the deaths of the people he was trying to save. Commander, harming those civilians will accomplish nothing except ensuring that you never leave this system alive. Empty threats from a species that... Carex's words were cut off as one of the researchers, Dr. James Park, suddenly broke free from his restraints and tackled the nearest Void Reaper guard. The linguist might have been a scholar, but he was also human, and humans had learned long ago that sometimes survival required violence. The guard's weapon discharged wildly as they struggled, the energy beam cutting through bulkheads and control panels. Other researchers joined the fight, using improvised weapons and desperate courage to overwhelm their captors. In the chaos, Elena managed to free herself and activate the station's emergency lockdown protocols, sealing critical sections and buying precious time. All ships attack pattern Delta, Chen ordered as the view screen went dark. Primary targets are any vessel with weapons trained on the station. Secondary targets are engines and weapon systems. We disable, we don't destroy unless we have to. The human fleet moved with a coordination that belied their smaller numbers. While other species preferred massive formations and overwhelming firepower, humans had learned to fight smart. The Defiant and Wolverine attacked from above and below, using the station itself as cover while the Stalker and Ranger flanked the enemy formation from opposite sides. The Void Reapers responded with brutal efficiency, their heavy cruisers turning to bring their main guns to bear on the human ships. Energy beams lanced through space, heating the vacuum to plasma temperatures as both sides opened fire. "Shields at 70%, reported the tactical officer as the Defiant shuddered under enemy fire. "Hull breaches on decks 12 and 15. "Damage control teams respond," Chen ordered, never taking his eyes off the tactical display. "Helm, bring us about for another attack run. Target their command ship's engines." The battle raged for what felt like hours but was actually only minutes. The Void Reaper ships were larger and more heavily armed, but they had been designed for raiding defenseless targets, not fighting opponents who shot back. The human vessels darted between enemy ships like fighters harassing giants, their superior maneuverability allowing them to avoid the worst of the enemy fire while delivering precise strikes to critical systems. "Captain, the Wolverine is reporting heavy damage," called the communications officer. "They've lost main power and are venting atmosphere." Chen watched as one of the Void Reaper destroyers moved to finish off the crippled human ship. Without hesitation, he made the kind of decision that defined his species. "All power to engines, ramming course for that destroyer." "Sir, that's suicide," protested Lieutenant Hayes. "No, Lieutenant, that's covering your shipmates." Chen turned to address his crew. "All hands, brace for impact. We're going to show these bastards what happens when you threaten innocent people." The Defiant accelerated directly toward the enemy destroyer, her hull glowing from the intense enemy fire. At the last moment, Chen ordered the helm to adjust course, bringing his ship alongside the enemy vessel instead of ramming it head-on. The two ships collided with tremendous force, their hulls grinding together as they spun through space, locked in a deadly embrace. "Boarding parties, go!" Chen ordered as magnetic grapples locked the ships together. Through the hull breaches created by the collision, human marines poured onto the Void Reaper destroyer. These were not the polished soldiers of core world armies, but frontier fighters who had learned their trade in the harsh reality of border conflicts. They moved through the enemy ship with ruthless efficiency, using their superior training and equipment to overcome the raiders' numerical advantage. Meanwhile, the remaining human ships continued their assault on the Void Reaper formation. The Stalker had disabled one of the heavy cruisers by targeting its reactor cooling systems, while the Ranger used its superior speed to stay ahead of enemy targeting systems while delivering hit-and-run attacks. On Research Station Alpha 7, Dr. Elena Vasquez and her fellow researchers had managed to barricade themselves in the central laboratory. Using equipment designed for archaeological excavation, they had constructed improvised weapons and traps that kept the remaining Void Reapers at bay. "Elena, I've managed to get partial power back to the communications array," called Dr. Sarah Kim from behind a makeshift barrier of research equipment. "I can try to contact the human ships." "Do it," Elena replied as she used a sonic excavator to keep a group of raiders from breaching their perimeter. "Tell them we've secured the artifact data and we're holding the central lab." The message reached the Defiant just as Captain Chen was leading a boarding party through the corridors of the enemy destroyer. The Void Reaper ship was a maze of dark passages and jury-rigged systems that reflected its builder's violent lifestyle. "Captain, we've got civilian resistance holding out in the station's central lab," reported Sergeant Rodriguez through the communications link. "They're requesting immediate extraction." Chen paused at a junction in the corridor, studying a tactical map of the station on his wrist display. "Negative on extraction, Sergeant. We're going to them. Prep the assault shuttles for emergency docking with the station." "Sir, the station's docking systems are offline," Rodriguez pointed out. "Then we'll make our own docking port," Chen replied grimly. "Human ingenuity at its finest." 20 minutes later, the research station shuddered as human assault shuttles used shaped charges to blast new openings in the hull. Marine squads poured through the breaches, their power armor allowing them to operate in the station's damaged atmosphere as they fought their way toward the central laboratory. The final confrontation came when Chen himself reached the laboratory where the researchers had made their stand. He found Elena and her team surrounded by improvised fortifications, their faces dirty and exhausted but their spirits unbroken. "Dr. Vasquez, I presume," Chen said as he helped her to her feet. "Sorry we're late to the party." Elena looked at the human captain with something approaching awe. "You came. Everyone said the Galactic Union would send help, but you actually came." "Ma'am, when someone asks for help, humans answer. It's what we do." The battle in space was winding down as the remaining Void Reaper ships found themselves outmaneuvered and outfought by an enemy they had grossly underestimated. Thane Carrix, watching his fleet being systematically destroyed by ships half the size of his own, began to understand why other species whispered about the humans and their Deathworld origins. As the last of the civilians was evacuated from the research station, Chen stood on the bridge of his battered flagship, looking out at the wreckage of what had once been a peaceful research facility. The cost of answering that distress call had been high, but the alternative, allowing innocent people to suffer while bureaucrats debated proper procedures, was unthinkable. The real reckoning was yet to come, and Chen knew that the galaxy was about to learn a hard lesson about ignoring the warnings of people who had nothing left to lose. The price of ignoring warnings. The corridors of Research Station Alpha 7 echoed with the sound of combat boots as Captain Marcus Chen made his way through the damaged sections toward the command center. His Marines had secured most of the station, but intelligence reports indicated that Thane Carrix had barricaded himself in the central control room with a handful of his most fanatical followers. Emergency lighting cast everything in shades of red and amber, and the air recycling system struggled to clear the smoke from damaged equipment. Through the reinforced windows, Chen could see the ongoing space battle as his remaining ships finished off the last of the Void Reaper fleet. "Captain, we've got movement in the command center," reported Sergeant Rodriguez through the communication link. "Thermal sensors show 6 hostiles heavily armed and entrenched." Chen checked his weapon and adjusted his tactical vest. Unlike the ornate uniforms favored by core world officers, his gear was purely functional, designed for the harsh realities of frontier combat. "Any sign of remaining civilians?" "Negative, sir. All research personnel have been accounted for and evacuated to the medical bay." "Good. That means we can stop playing nice." The final assault on the command center was swift and brutal. Human Marines used breaching charges to blow open the reinforced doors, followed by flashbang grenades that disoriented the defenders. The Void Reapers, despite their reputation for violence, found themselves facing opponents who had learned warfare on a world where everything was trying to kill them. Chen found Thane Carrix backed against the main control console, his cybernetic implants sparking from damage sustained in the fighting. The Void Reaper commander's pale skin was now marked with burns and cuts, but his black eyes still held the arrogant malevolence that had terrorized the frontier for years. "Captain Chen," Carrix spoke, his voice distorted by damaged vocal implants. "You have won this engagement, but you have doomed your species. The Void Reapers number in the thousands. We have fleets across a dozen star systems. This act of aggression will not go unanswered." Chen stepped closer, his weapon trained on the alien commander. "Carrix, you made one critical mistake. You threatened innocent people and expected us to just stand by and watch it happen. And what will you do now, human? Execute a prisoner of war? Show the galaxy that your species are nothing but barbarians from a savage world?" For a moment, Chen was silent, considering the implications of his next actions. The Galactic Union had strict protocols regarding the treatment of prisoners, even pirates and raiders. Core world species prided themselves on their civilized approach to conflict resolution. "No," Chen said finally. "I'm going to give you exactly what you gave those researchers, a choice." He gestured to the damaged viewports showing the wreckage of the Void Reaper fleet drifting in space. "Your ships are destroyed, your crew is dead or captured. You can surrender and stand trial for your crimes, or you can try to fight your way out." Carrix looked around the command center at his remaining followers. These were hard beings who had spent their lives taking what they wanted from those too weak to resist. The concept of mercy was alien to them, but so was the idea of an enemy who would offer it. "You would let me go free?" Carrix asked suspiciously. "I said you had a choice. I didn't say freedom was one of the options." Chen's expression hardened. "You're going to stand trial for the murder of thousands of innocent people across dozens of star systems. But you'll get due process, legal representation, and a fair hearing. That's more than you gave any of your victims." The Void Reaper commander's scarred features twisted with rage. "I will never submit to the judgment of inferior species." Carrix lunged forward, a concealed blade extending from his cybernetic arm as he tried to strike down the human captain. But Chen had been expecting this, and his response was swift and decisive. A single shot from his sidearm ended the threat permanently. "Should have taken the trial," Chen said quietly as he looked down at the body of the alien commander. 3 hours later, the last of the civilians had been transferred to the human medical ship, and Chen stood in the station's main laboratory where Dr. Elena Vasquez was carefully packing the precious artifact data they had died to protect. "Doctor, what exactly did you discover down there that was worth so much blood?" Chen asked as he watched her work. Elena looked up from the crystalline storage matrices containing their research data. Captain, we found evidence of a galactic civilization that existed over 1 million years ago. They left behind warnings, messages carved into planetary surfaces and embedded in quantum crystals. She activated a holographic display showing star charts and symbolic text. They faced the same challenges we face today: isolated worlds, raiding fleets, species too proud or too afraid to work together for mutual protection. According to their records, they fell because they couldn't unite against common threats. Chen studied the ancient warnings with growing understanding. And you think we're heading for the same fate? Not if we learn from their mistakes, Elena replied. Captain, what you did here today proved something important. It showed that some species will fight for others, even when there's no immediate benefit. That's the foundation of real civilization. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the bridge. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from a Galactic Union fleet, reported Lieutenant Commander Walsh. They're requesting permission to approach and offer assistance. Chen's expression became grim. How many ships, and how long have they been en route? 12 vessels, sir. Battle group configuration. Based on their hyperspace signatures, they've been traveling for approximately 6 hours. 6 hours, Chen repeated with bitter irony. They left after the fighting was already over and are just now arriving to offer help. Chen made his way back to the bridge of the Defiant, where the main view screen showed the approaching Galactic Union fleet. The ships were massive and elegant, their hulls gleaming with the kind of polish that spoke of parade formations rather than combat experience. Put me through to their flagship, Chen ordered. The screen flickered to show Admiral Thessarian Vex, a tall, graceful being from the core world of Altara Prime. His species was known for their diplomatic skills and their careful approach to interstellar relations. His expression showed the kind of polite concern that politicians used when they wanted to appear sympathetic without actually committing to action. Captain Chen, I am Admiral Vex of the Galactic Union Emergency Response Fleet. We received reports of pirate activity in this system and have come to render assistance. Chen looked at the alien admiral with the same expression he might use when examining something unpleasant stuck to his boot. Admiral, your assistance is approximately 6 hours too late. The civilians have been rescued, the raiders have been neutralized, and the crisis has been resolved. Admiral Vex's elegant features showed surprise. Captain, surely you cannot have defeated an entire Void Reaper fleet with such a small force. Our intelligence reports indicated they had superior numbers and firepower. Admiral, your intelligence was correct about their numbers. They were wrong about what matters in a fight. Chen gestured toward the wreckage floating outside the viewports. Those raiders made the mistake of thinking that bigger ships and more guns automatically meant victory. They forgot that wars are won by people, not by equipment. Captain Chen, while we appreciate your enthusiasm in responding to this emergency, we must point out that unauthorized military action in disputed territories violates several Galactic Union treaties and protocols. Chen's jaw tightened as he processed this statement. Admiral, are you actually going to lecture me about protocols while floating through the wreckage of ships that were holding innocent civilians hostage? Captain, we understand your emotional response, but civilized societies must follow established procedures for resolving conflicts. If everyone simply took unilateral military action whenever they disagreed with the situation, the result would be chaos. Admiral, let me explain something to you about chaos, Chen replied, his voice growing colder with each word. Chaos is what happens when good people do nothing while innocent civilians are murdered by pirates. Chaos is what happens when bureaucrats hold committee meetings while children are sold into slavery. Chaos is what happens when civilized societies value procedures more than human life. Admiral Vex's expression showed the kind of patient tolerance that core world species reserve for primitive cultures they considered beneath their notice. Captain, surely you understand that the Galactic Union has successfully maintained peace for over 3 centuries through diplomatic solutions and careful negotiation. Admiral, your peace has been maintained by ignoring suffering that happened far enough away from your core worlds that you could pretend it didn't exist, Chen shot back. How many frontier colonies have been raided while your diplomats negotiated? How many research stations have been destroyed while your committees debated proper responses? The alien admiral was silent for a moment, clearly struggling to find a diplomatic response to accusations that struck uncomfortably close to the truth. Captain Chen, while isolated incidents of piracy are regrettable, they must be weighed against the greater good of maintaining galactic stability. Isolated incidents? Chen's voice rose with barely controlled anger. Admiral, Thane Carrick's and his fleet had been operating in this sector for over 5 years. They had attacked dozens of settlements and killed thousands of people. Your own intelligence files list 47 confirmed attacks by this group alone. At what point do isolated incidents become a pattern of failure? Admiral Vex shifted uncomfortably in his command chair. Captain, the situation is more complex than you understand. The Void Reapers operate across multiple jurisdictions and legal frameworks. Coordinating a response requires careful planning and extensive consultation with people who have never been shot at in their lives, Chen interrupted. Admiral, while you were consulting and planning, 43 civilians were fighting for their lives with improvised weapons and desperate courage. Dr. Vasquez and her team held off trained killers using archaeological equipment and sheer determination because they knew that help might never come. The silence that followed was broken by a new voice entering the conversation. Dr. Elena Vasquez had made her way to the bridge and now stood beside Captain Chen, her research clothing still bearing the marks of combat. Admiral Vex, she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen the worst of galactic society and survived it. I am Dr. Elena Vasquez, senior researcher at Station Alpha 7. I want you to understand something about what happened here today. She gestured toward the human crew working around them. These people traveled over 300 light-years in response to a distress call from strangers they had never met. They risked their lives and their ships to save us, not because they had to, but because they chose to. That choice is what civilization really means. Admiral Vex looked between the human captain and the researcher, clearly struggling to understand the concept they were trying to explain. Dr. Vasquez, while we appreciate Captain Chen's direct approach to the situation, proper procedures exist for good reasons. Unilateral military action can have far-reaching consequences that— Admiral, Elena interrupted, let me share something we discovered in our research. The ancient civilization that left these warnings fell because they couldn't overcome the same bureaucratic paralysis that nearly killed us today. They had all the technology, all the resources, and all the knowledge they needed to defend themselves. What they lacked was the will to act when action was necessary. She activated her portable data display, showing images of ancient ruins and translated text. Their final messages speak of committees that debated while cities burned, of protocols that prevented aid from reaching those who needed it most, of a society so concerned with following proper procedures that they forgot why those procedures existed in the first place. Captain Chen stepped forward, his expression showing the kind of determination that had driven his species to survive on a world that tried to kill them every day. Admiral Vex, I'm going to make something very clear to you and anyone else who's listening to this transmission. Humanity will not stand by and watch innocent people suffer while committees debate proper procedures. He paused to let the words sink in before continuing. From this day forward, any settlement, research station, or colony that requests our protection will receive it. We will patrol the frontier territories, respond to distress calls, and hunt down pirates and raiders wherever we find them. We will do this whether the Galactic Union approves or not. Admiral Vex's elegant features showed alarm. Captain, you cannot simply declare unilateral protection over vast areas of space. The legal and diplomatic implications— Admiral, the legal implications are simple, Chen replied. When someone asks for help, we help them. When criminals threaten innocent people, we stop the criminals. The diplomatic implications are that any government or organization that has a problem with this policy is welcome to discuss it with us directly. The transmission ended, leaving the Galactic Union fleet floating in space as the human ships prepared for departure. Admiral Vex stared at the blank screen, finally beginning to understand that the galaxy had just changed in ways that no amount of diplomatic protocol could reverse. Over the following months, word of the Battle of Kepler 442b spread throughout the frontier territories. The story grew with each telling. Humans who had traveled across the galaxy to save strangers, who had defeated a superior force through courage and determination, who had kept their promise to protect innocent life no matter the cost. Settlements that had paid tribute to pirates for decades stopped making payments and requested human protection instead. Research stations in dangerous areas began broadcasting on human frequencies. Colony ships changed course to establish settlements in human-protected space. The Galactic Union found itself facing a crisis they had never anticipated. Their careful balance of power, built on compromise and negotiation, was being challenged by a species that valued action over discussion and results over procedures. Captain Marcus Chen stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Fort Kepler, the first human military base in the frontier territories. Through the reinforced windows, he could see patrol ships launching on their regular circuits, ensuring that no raider or pirate would ever again threaten the innocent under his protection. Dr. Elena Vasquez joined him at the viewport, her research now focused on understanding the lessons left by the ancient civilization and applying them to current galactic politics. "Any regrets, Captain?" she asked as they watched the ships disappear into hyperspace. Chen was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. "Doctor, when I joined the service, I took an oath to protect innocent life and defend those who couldn't defend themselves. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow, that oath means the same thing." He turned to face her with the kind of smile that spoke of a job well done. "The only regret I have is that it took a distress call to show the galaxy what civilization really means." In the depths of space, monitoring stations throughout dozens of star systems maintained their constant watch. But now they listened for something different. They listened for distress calls, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, there were people who would answer, who would come running toward danger instead of away from it. The galaxy had learned that warnings could be ignored, but consequences were absolute. And the Deathworld fleet had moved, one rescue at a time, toward a future where no call for help would go unanswered. The price of ignoring warnings had been paid in full, and the galaxy would never be the same.